Welcome. So today we thought we'd show you a little bit about the user feedback that we got last week during the time we canceled this call. Actually, it was more than just an hour, of course. But if there are any questions or anything before we get started. Okay. So last week, Rick and I were in Phoenix, Arizona, where every day it got up to triple digits.
With Rick Avila.
But luckily, we had air conditioning. And we met with Claudia Hinchke and David Yankelevitz of LCAP and Mount Sinai. We also met with Providencia, who's called Pee-wee. She's the current nurse navigator at Phoenix. We also met with Sam Aguayo, Dr. Sam Aguayo, who is a doctor down there of pulmonary? I forget which kind of doctor he is. But anyway. Pulmonology. Yep. And he is kind of the champion for the VA PALS program at Phoenix, and he's a very good champion. And then who else? We have Ricardo Avila, and then we had various guests come in at different times, including when we were looking at the CT evaluation form. We had some of the radiologists come in and help us go over it. So I just want to give you a quick overview. Let's see. Of the changes that they've asked for in the CT evaluation form. As you can see, we went through and we actually made a lot of, a couple of the bigger changes we made was in the abnormalities section, where different sections are going to be hidden so that, here, we'll go to the abnormalities page. So that if, like here for cardiac abnormalities, if the answer is no or not visible, then all of this section down here will is hidden and will remain so. But if they click yes, then it becomes unhidden so that they can put in the information. And that is going to be on all of the abnormality sections except for abdominal abnormality. And I must say that one of the radiologists we had specialized in abdominal radiology, so he was the guy in the room, so he got his way. One of the other major things is that all of these sections have additional comments, a place to make more comments, and then we'll be adding a button that says whether to include in impressions. And what this means, I should go back just a little bit. So the purpose of these forms is not to just have a form that's filled out. It's to make a report. And that report is to be, Rick may have to explain this a little bit more. But
a TIU note.
Yeah, it'll be a TIU note, and we'll go to through CPRS and be filed in VISTA, and then the individual fields will be saved on the VA PALS server. And also, I think that at least some of them will be saved as health factors on VISTA. So when that report is created, the radiologist wanted it so that these comments could either be included in that report or not. And yeah, well, the impression section down here is the corresponding section in the report is where those comments will go. I don't. They also may be pre-populated into the impression remarks section there. Another kind of biggish change is that VA has asked that we also support the LUNGRADS protocol and the LCAP protocol, so that we can do, they want a quality analysis to show some of the results from the two different protocols. And LUNGRADS and LCAP, in the information they capture, are very similar. I believe LCAP captures a few more things, but you know, if they show up on the LUNGRADS reports, that's not a bad thing. But we'll have to add 2 fields for LUNGRADS because they categorize them. You can see over here 0, 1, 2, 3, 4A, 4B, and 4X. And then there's a modification, which is S or C. And I don't remember what those are. I believe C is that they've previously had cancer. But if you're really curious, Google LUNGRADS and you will find out more than you want to know, I'm sure, unless you are a pulmonologist or radiologist. Oh, they're going to move the follow-up section so that it is below the impressions section. That was my request, because to me it makes more sense to have the follow-up come after the thing that the follow-up is based on. And they very quickly agreed, so I imagine they'd already thought of it.
Just to interrupt, for the LUNGRADS modification, I think you can pick both C and S for an exam. So I'm not sure if a drop-down would be the best
thank
UI.
You.
Yep.
I bet you're right. So I will add that. I hadn't thought about it, but I'm sure you're right. So, awesome. I'm trying to think. Oh, there was a tab regarding image quality, and that had to do with kind of the performance of the CT scanner, I believe. And that is going to be removed entirely because that's not included in what we're doing right now. I'm trying to think if there's anything else in particular. Every place where it says NV is going to be changed to not visible. But I think that is the big things. We've removed a few things and added a couple of things. But for the most part, it should do basically the same things. You got your, yeah.
Hi, this is Rick. So another change that applies both to this form and to all the forms, and in some ways is the biggest change, is the addition of a level of integration with CPRS that we were originally planning to do for the next version, version 19 of this application. And instead, it became clear that it's essential as part of the initial feature set in version 18. And that is in a complete integration of these forms with TIU in CPRS. And Linda alluded to that before, but the full scope of it is that as long as they're just editing these forms, they're just manipulating our database. But we're going to be adding we're either going to be renaming the submit button to sign, or we'll be adding a new signing button. We haven't decided yet exactly how we want the UI portion to work, but they'll be able to click a button to say that they're ready to freeze this and convert it into a TIU note of some kind, and probably architecturally a clinical reminder with health factors. And when they click the button, it'll generate the text that would be submitted to CPRS as a note, and they'll have the option of signing it and of assigning additional signers. And then when they do that, it'll be sent through the remote procedures into CPRS and should show up then just like any other note with associated health factors would show up. And the handling of the additional signers would be taken care of by the CPRS GUI. During the signing, they could specify who they were, but our UI isn't going to be responsible for notifying people that they have things to sign and so forth. That would all be taken care of through the standard notifications within CPRS. And PWE tells us that the primary purpose of that is to ensure that as the patient is progressing through the protocols, that the nurse navigator and or the radiologists are handling through these forms, the rest of the care team and other people who need to know that this is taking place get notified and sign as additional signers so that they too have concurred on the medical record. In order to, now that creates a problem. It creates the same problem that was created for CPRS back in the 90s, which is the moment that you start locking down the data, which you have to do for legal medical reasons, to say this is it, this is what goes in the medical record, you then also have to now deal with the problem, what if the data is wrong? Until now, if the data is wrong, you just pull the form back up and edit it and change the field. But from a medical record perspective, that doesn't work. So we'll do exactly the same thing CPRS does, which is we'll have a button or something similar that will give people the ability to say, this form that has this note that's done, that's signed, I would like to make a correction to it, an addendum. And then they could bring up and add the text that they want to append to it and sign that. So in our UI, in the flow between the windows, at the moment that you sign one of these forms, the edit button will disappear after that on the case review. You won't be able to edit it anymore, but there will be a report button you can bring up to see the completed note. So this is significant. This is a big deal. But fortunately, and we're going to have to write some new stuff in the weeks ahead to pull that off, including the ability. One of the things that supports that feature in CPRS is that in addition to having the user interface, the CPRS GUI stop allowing you to edit the in-progress note, which is what happens when you sign it. Under the hood, the global structures also have to be locked down and protected. And the way that's done in MUMPS is a checksum is calculated. They look at the part of the TIU global that corresponds to this note. They add up the values of all the characters. They come up with a checksum value, and they entangle it with the signature code of the person who signed it. And then in the user interface, the way that manifests is the signature block at the bottom that gives the name of the doctor and their title only appears correct if the underlying data has not been tampered with. So it's immediately apparent if somebody has messed with the data, if the medical record has been compromised. And we'll need to pull off the same thing in our graph store where we're storing these fields. When something is signed, we'll lock it down, we'll calculate the checksum, we'll entangle the signature code, and we'll have the signature block do the same thing. Fortunately, that's all done with subroutines, right? The Salt Lake folks who developed this, and I guess they worked some with Wally Fort in San Francisco back in the day. They believed in modular programming. We believe in modular programming. The subroutines already exist on, since our VA PALS server is a Vista system, we have those same subroutines. So we'll either be able to use them directly or at least adapt them in order to create this functionality. But this is going to be one of the things that some of us are focusing on in the next couple of weeks in order to create this level of integration between CPRS and VA PALS. Back to you, Linda.
Thanks, Rick. I think I've pretty much, other than the individual remove this or move that, or the default, I think I've gone over everything that's kind of a major change. So, Anybody have any questions or comments?
Hi, this is Dr. Chenoweth. I'm kind of new to this particular group, and I was a little bit late, so excuse me if I'm talking about something that's been covered already. So when you're talking about all this for the CT evaluation form, am I correct that this is going to be what's populating the radiology report? Because what I was hearing was talk about notes as opposed to reports.
Right. When you say radiology report, I think you're talking about something different than we are.
Okay.
Because you're talking about the formal radiology report created by the radiologists using the
PACS server?
The PACS server and interacting.
No, this is Rick Avila. I can clear this up. So when this form is filled out by hopefully eventually Dr. Chenoweth, the final step when it's submitted will be to generate an automated report. That report will be sent via sent to CPRS and show up under notes as a radiology note. Dr. Chenoweth, is that correct from your understanding?
Well, we don't have notes in radiology. We have reports. And the reports go into a different place.
I'm sorry, not notes. Reports. I should have said reports. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, right. So that's the intent is that, what we input into this form will ultimately need to go into the radiology report rather than a note.
That's the plan.
Okay.
Right, and a report will be generated from this data that we can put as our final report.
That's correct.
That's right.
Okay, good. So also just sort of as a heads up, and I think Rick is aware of this, there is a group of us that have been working on a version of the CT evaluation form, and we're hoping to get that into Rick's hands very soon.
I believe it's going to be passed over to Claudia Henschke first, and then once everybody's in agreement, then we'll pass it over to this team, and we'll start implementing.
Right.
So, but if you see anything that's basically counter to what direction you're going in, please let us know when appropriate.
Okay.
Thank you.
And is there a possibility to get a copy of what you've done so far so we can at least start taking a look at the differences between the two?
The plan is to take everything that we're discussing here, implement it as a first version, make it available at a demo website, and then have you take a look at it as fast as we can. There were many other changes discussed in Phoenix, and this is being done first so that we can get you that feedback quick.
Also, I believe that the demo site already exists, so if you want to see what we have done that will be changing, you can do that.
Well, it hasn't been updated, so it hasn't been updated. But once it is, yes.
Okay. What else?
So, in order to here's another thing that I've been thinking about. In order to do this clever little bit of of interaction between the VA PALS server and CPRS on the Vista server, in order to send what we've built as a note or a report, depending on which form it is, into CPRS through the remote procedures, there needs to be clinical reminders with associated health factors defined on the Vista side that we say this is what we're submitting. So for each of these forms, I believe we need to actually develop the associated clinical reminders. There is a draft, and I say draft, but a working draft of the intake form that's currently in use at Phoenix, and we'll want to reconcile the differences between that and the current intake form. We did get some feedback on the intake form as well. But as far as I know, there isn't yet a draft clinical reminder with associated health factors for CT eval, for follow-up, for any of the rest of them. So those are going to need to be developed as well in order for this to work. So that way, when we're calling the remote procedure and we tell it which clinical reminder we're submitting, it recognizes it. It says, oh yes, I've got that and I know what to do, and so forth. We can't just generate notes in a void. It has to be defined in TIU. So there is that additional work that's got to be done, and the definitions of those clinical reminders and health factors will then need to be installed on the Vista server in order for us to be able to submit to it. So it's going to be an interesting piece of work.
So what else do you have on your minds? And to my team, is there anything else that you wanted to show? I believe this is all we talked about yesterday.
Well, certainly Larry Carlson right now is chasing down the remote procedures that we need to use. He's been working as well with Alexis and with Matt King, and they're scoping out what the CPRS side artifacts are that we're going to be interacting with, and what the basic broker artifacts are.
And they've been having, well, Larry's been finding some interesting stuff as he's been digging around. That's going to be very helpful.
He has. So, like, you know, some things will be pre-populating. Like, if you just scroll up just like a fraction of an inch, we get the full complete field that's at the bottom of your screen. So, radiologists, we can pre-populate with the current user because the CT eval form is never filled out by the nurse navigator. It's filled out by a radiologist. And it would be the current whoever the user is, that's the radiologist. But signing radiologist might not be the same person, and it could be, I mean, anybody with the appropriate privileges on the Vista side could be selected by the current user. And, you know, these are the sorts of things that to a user designing this is like, well, yeah, just put the list of radiologists. But to the programmers, it's like, but we have to figure out how to get the list of radiologists out of the Vista production system and copied over here so that it can be on a drop-down list. We have to find that remote procedure that can get us that list. And Larry's chasing that down right now. We have a similar issue that's going to come up with additional signers, only it's a broader problem because the additional signer doesn't have to be a radiologist. In fact, one of the reasons why you might want additional signers is because you want the primary care provider to be notified, or maybe some of the nurses that are part of the care team. So that's got to be an even larger group of users. People with clinical privileges would be among the people who could be the potential additional signers that would be selected when someone is signing one of these things. So chasing down the remote procedures for each one of those is among the things we'll be working on in the weeks ahead.
And for go ahead.
Excuse me, this is Dr. Chenoweth again. One thing to be thinking about too for this, in addition to the radiologist, consider the sites that have residents may also need a slot for the resident radiologist in addition to the attending radiologist.
Okay.
Talk some more about that. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, if you're in a teaching institution such as we are, in addition to the attending physician radiologists who are reading studies, we also have residents. Every exam that's read by a resident has to be co-read with the attending radiologist. And usually the way it works is the resident will look at the case first, write the report, and then
VA Medical Center has 4 community-based practices for your primary care needs. We can see you for your routine care and help you coordinate your specialty care with the main VA Medical Center facility. Locations include...
Hello?
There we go.
Okay. So anyway, the resident will go through, look at the case, come up with a preliminary report, which is usually put into the voice recognition system. And then the case will be reread with the attending radiologist who will either agree with the resident report or may want to change parts of it. But when the report is finalized, it's essentially signed off on by both the resident and the attending radiologist. Both of those names will get into the final radiology report.
That's interesting. So in CPRS...
So for those cases, we would need a way to make sure that the attending radiologist gets in there as well as the resident radiologist. And obviously, the resident radiologist would not, do the final signing off on the report. That would be done by the attending.
Right.
Okay, so this signing radiologist thing is starting to make a little bit more sense to me.
Right. Okay, so presumably there's a similar flow then for existing notes or reports in CPRS that radiologists might interact with, in which the resident and the attending are both identified.
Well, we do not really put in. I mean, we put in reports, and so that workflow is a little bit different than notes. Notes are kind of a different issue, but when we read a case, we're generating reports, and so that has, like I say, both the name of the resident radiologist as well as the attending radiologist. I'm not aware of any capability that we have to add other people to the report to sign off on it. As far as I'm aware, and there might well be some way to do it in VISTA, I don't know. But as far as I'm aware, we do not have the ability to assign other people to co-sign the report, such as the clinicians. The report gets sent to the clinician and whoever else VISTA says the report will go to, but that's not something that we add in there as a radiologist.
So when you build those radiology reports, when they're first being built and then signed, is that being done in CPRS or is that being done in different software?
Typically, the way it works is we generate the report in voice recognition, which plugs into our PACS system. The voice recognition system, we sign the report in the voice recognition system, and then that gets sent to VISTA along with our, signature, code or authorization or whatever. So we don't directly interact with VISTA. We're directly interacting with the PACS and the voice recognition system.
Gotcha. And the signing takes place on the PACS system as well?
The signing takes place usually in voice recognition, but it might also be in the PACS system. It really depends on which individual PACS system you have and which voice recognition system you have. Okay. And like I say, the voice recognition system generally plugs into the PACS system.
Gotcha.
So there might be some PACS systems where the signature is generated by the PACS. Others, such as mine, the signature is generated in voice recognition. But either way, that gets sent from the PACS/voice recognition to VISTA. So we don't directly interact with VISTA. Now, there is a way to do that in VISTA that we used to do, like 25 years ago, but nobody does that these days.
Gotcha.
Hi, this is Claudia Henschke. I just joined also.
Hi, Claudia. Welcome to the call.
Hi.
We were just talking through the workflow about how the report generation and the signing is done by the resident radiologist and the attending radiologist. Trying to think through the flow and kind of how we want to interact with that.
Well, that's a new wrinkle.
Indeed.
Let's get through the first part first.
That makes sense.
Because these, at the Phoenix VA, there are no residents.
Okay. So, anything else that we want to talk about in particular? Claudia, I will send you, email you this PDF I've made where I hand wrote our changes on the CT evaluation form so that you can take a look. But unless anybody has anything else they want to talk about in particular, I'm inclined to end the call.
But I do just want to check in and make sure that we've successfully kind of pulled together kind of what our approach wants to be in light of what Jeffrey was telling us, which is that for a site that did have a resident and an attending, and it would be the attending who signed, who would be listed as the signing radiologist, and it would be the resident who is the one presumably filling out the initial version of this?
Correct.
Okay.
That's why in our original forms we have, we have that additional field also.
For the second reader?
well, somewhere higher up we have a place for the fellow, but the signature is always by the signing radiologist.
It has to be.
Has to be.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
Yeah, they have to take responsibility.
And that's for the fellow radiologist is the one that does the kind of the training with the co-reading of the first 100 or 200.
Well, that's totally separate. But the Phoenix VA does not have residents, so they have only signing radiologists, and other places may have residents or fellows like we have, and like Jeff apparently has, but.
Okay.
Twist.
Good.
But let's try and get the system working for
Phoenix.
For Phoenix.
Yeah.
Jeff, what are you thinking of starting?
We're trying to work towards that.
Yeah, but I mean, I think we need to test it first at Phoenix and get everything set there, and then be able to, if Drew's decided who the next place is, then we'll do it. Is that you?
Not to my knowledge, but that would be up to Drew.
Right.
So yeah, one of the things that we recognize about the software lifecycle on this is that the version 18, this first version that we're doing, built on the 17 years that Claudia and her group have done with their software, is not trying to be the final version that's going to roll out across the VA, and it also won't have all of the features that each of the VAs would want. It's just got to be pretty close to the overall picture. But then the thing it definitely has to do is
close to the minimum that's needed, right?
Yes.
And then the bells and whistles can be added, but it needs to be as close to it should be the minimum or better of what's needed and working.
Exactly. And then there'll be patches and follow-up versions as we roll out to other hospitals and work with their teams to find out, what's their minimum functionality that they require, what are the additional changes.
Yeah.
There's also some thought that will need to be given to how this form interacts with the radiology exam request. Mm-hmm. For example, I see on the screen.
So Jeff, I think we've worked that out for Phoenix, because that's what we spent the last week working out with everybody there. And then I think once it's worked out for how it's done with Phoenix, and then we would sit down with you and work out how it's done for your site, and whether, how many other versions there would be.
So we certainly appreciate a chance to kind of look down the road a little bit so that we can be better prepared.
Sure.
Right. Yeah,
sure, I just don't want it to slow down. My only concern is that I know everybody, including Drew and Rick, are anxious to get it done, and I want to make sure that, because we have to test it in the environment of CPRS and everything in Phoenix, I want to make sure that we meet the time schedules for that.
Exactly.
Because that's really the key next step.
Jeff can kind of maybe write up for you a little bit, and we can start thinking about it.
Yeah, Jeff, do you want to write, send us an email about the thoughts, or the areas that you see that would then need to be addressed after that?
Yeah, I could start thinking about that, and we've been kind of working on some draft ideas of our own too, but at some point we probably just need to sit down and just discuss that.
Yeah, I think it would be good if you put it down for us, and then send it to all of the team, and we can all sort of start internally discussing it.
Yeah, we can discuss with Drew on how we want to approach that. It might be helpful too if we got a copy of what you've developed here so far, so we have a chance to look at it.
Well, that's what we'll be able to share that at the, not next week, but the following week. when we see it. When we also see it.
I think that's about the timeline, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because the current demo site is out of date, especially considering we just got together and agreed to do all these changes. So whatever's on the demo site is definitely not going to be representative of what goes into Phoenix. It's got the look and feel, but not the details.
Not the content.
Yeah, because we spent. I mean, Jeff knows that we spent all last week out there and working together very productively. So I think we got a lot of things done.
Yeah, it was a great meeting.
That's good to hear.
So yeah, so let's just keep kind of coordinating this. We'll keep adding and subtracting as we get refinements. But it would be great if you start thinking about the things that you're going to need, so we can start talking it up amongst us.
Will do.
Thank you.
Okay, well, just so everybody who's new on the call is familiar, we've been holding this weekly call for, I think, many months now, and
8 months, I think.
Yeah, quite a while. And we typically go over the more the IT side of what we're doing, but today we thought we would just cover the changes that are coming, so that the people in the rest of the open source community could see what we're doing and how offer suggestions and other things. So I don't know, Linda, do you have other things? Did you want to keep going on this?
I don't think so, unless anybody has particular questions. Our team is busily working along, but doesn't have anything else that they want to show at this meeting. I think next meeting might, the next call might be interesting.
No, this is a good meeting. I was unaware that you guys were discussing this stuff at this meeting, and I think this is actually a very good place.
Yeah, I thought you were on a much more technical level.
We typically are, but when we get new requirements, we want to share with everybody.
Yeah, no, this is a good forum to discuss this. I think this is very well.
But maybe then, do we get emails to everybody, or we just know that this is the time?
It's a weekly meeting, right?
It's a weekly meeting, and I believe I think there's notifications for, once you've signed in with your email, I believe you get notifications if we cancel or something.
Okay. No, that's perfect. I mean, if it's going to be a completely sort of technical meeting, then, you can let us know.
You'll see that in the beginning of the call, we'll describe what we're going to do, and then dive into that. If there's a need for a more sort of parallel clinical call, we can set that up too.
What we're trying to do in the structure of the calls is have the first half of the call especially front load anything that's user facing. So that
it's just the only thing I'm saying is sometimes for me it's hard to make these meetings. I have to. So if you guys know in advance it's really going to be very technical or something I'm not interested or that I'm not going to be useful for, you can just let me know. Rick, you can send it to me privately or something. You guys usually know. You guys usually know ahead of time.
A reminder, and the reminder we usually say just briefly what we're going to be talking about, so you can get a hint from there. If you want to get the reminders, you'll want to go to OSEHRA.org and sign in, get a login if you don't have one already, and become part of the VA PALS group. And then you'll get all of the notifications.
Okay, no, that's perfect. That's perfect. Thank you. Okay. Who's on first?
So, Linda, anything further? I think we lost Linda. Linda, are you there?
Doesn't sound like it. I'm not.
Can you still hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
I can hear Linda.
That's odd. Well, we're hearing.
That's all we had planned for today. So let's call this a wrap. Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.